to the Flower Essence Podcast with Kathleen Aspens and Rokana Feld. We are two flower essence practitioners who love to share insights and knowledge about plants and their healing intelligence.
Flower essences are vibrational remedies used in flower essence therapy. Unlike essential oils, they can be safely used by everyone, from infants to elders, as well as with our animal companions. Join us in the Garden of Plant Wisdom, where nature helps you grow yourself whole.
And today our topic is worry and overwhelm. I'm sure this is not something that affects probably any of our listeners, not like us. Worry and overwhelm, I think, is sort of an endemic problem in the world today. I think all of us have so many different projects going on and work commitments and home commitments and all of the inputs from social media and the news and the phones going off all the time. It's really a naturally overwhelming state. The good news is that there are flower essences that can help us with these really unpleasant sensations of feeling overwhelmed and stressed all the time. And we can learn to reconnect to our ability to feel more calm, feel more centered, and get more done without all that spin. So, Rokana, it's good to be together again. We've been talking about this concept about what we want to share with our work with flower essences. What have you been thinking since last we talked?
Hi, Kathleen. It's great to be here again. With stress and overwhelm, I mean, everyone on this planet is pretty much walking around with an overstimulated nervous system. I mean,
True.
you cannot escape it with the world we live in today. And our bodies are not, and our emotions are not used to this. It's like I feel like we haven't had a chance to evolve yet to the 24/7 news cycle and social media updates and the modern stresses. It's relatively recent in our history, these kinds of things. And, I see it every day, the fallout from it, with just even looking at friends' posts on Facebook or social media. And you can tell that something tends to put people over, something will put someone over the edge, and they'll react in a way that I know is not them or their personality. And the stress of the nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system fight or flight response, which we need to have for survival, it's just constantly getting bombarded. So I do love, of course, flower essences are so great to be a part of somebody's toolbox for dealing with this. Now, when it comes to stress, you can't treat stress, for example. It's what happens based on stimuli, external or internal stimuli. But you can help the way your body responds and the way your emotions respond. And you can help by taking a look at what are those triggers and how can they maybe be changed. So I know we both have some, a lot of essences that we use in our practice. What are some that you like to work with?
Yeah, I like what you say about the nervous system, and the more that we can do to help downshift our nervous systems. I really look at the origin of where our nervous system started to become overwhelmed. And a lot of us, as children, perhaps our sleep started to get disrupted due to maybe a trauma or a stressful household. And that pattern never really became normalized, where we can get good, deep, restful sleep anymore. And I think that's really the foundation of a healthy nervous system, is to be able to downshift and be calm and be able to sleep naturally without needing to have any inputs from. A lot of people use all sorts of substances to help them sleep. And, sometimes those can be roads to getting good sleep, but the problem is really just the bottom line is that we're not getting enough sleep, enough relaxation. We're constantly stimulated. So one of the essences that I would start with talking about would be some from the Bach line of essences. I think Elm is sort of like the essence of the time. One of the shorthand versions of Elm is when you're feeling overwhelmed. So anytime, that's the classic. It's really the basic description of Elm is when normally you can really manage your life and you can kind of run all of the elements that you do run. And just at times you get overwhelmed where normally you could handle it, but today is just not a good day and it's all just too much. In those cases, Elm is really appropriate. I think that that's kind of a good starting point. I'm always looking when I'm working with clients, I'm always looking at things from the Chinese medicine perspective. So, usually, a lot of times when my clients are feeling overwhelmed, it's more of a sort of a spleen type of scenario where they ruminate and they worry and they kind of have the cycling thoughts rather than that they have a higher anxiety, which might be more of a kidney qi deficiency kind of a pattern. So I'm always looking to differentiate those and then find the essences that are more aligned with how their pattern manifests rather than sort of maybe in sort of a typical understanding, somebody might just say, I'm stressed. It's like, well, let's find out a little bit more about that so we can differentiate between what kind of stress you're experiencing so that we can get a lot closer to a good remedy that will really work for you. In those cases of that sort of worry cycling, keep you up at night, maybe kind of just chewing over stuff, I find the chestnuts to be really, really useful. Particularly white chestnut is excellent for that sleep disturbance where you wake up in the middle of the night and you go through that whole to-do list over and over and over. And so white chestnut's great. Red chestnut is kind of a personal favorite because for me, I tend to worry about my pets, my husband, other people rather than internal worry. So I know I've fallen into my red chestnut pattern and need to booster myself with some red chestnut when I wake up in the middle of the night and listen for breathing. Like I'm sure people have just like vanished in the middle of the night. So that's kind of my little paranoia. And I know, oh, it's time for red chestnut. And it's just amazing how much it helps with those kinds of worries where you start getting into that catastrophic thinking about something horrible going to happen to your family. Like, oh, please, red chestnut. What do you
Right,
think?
right. Yeah. For the overstimulated nervous system, one that I really like is albizia, also called the mimosa tree. And I know that's used in Chinese medicine as well, but
Yes.
and in the herb, the flowers and bark of that tree have been used traditionally in Chinese medicine for anxiety, stress, and depression. They call it the happiness herb or the happiness tree, I
Oh, that's
believe.
lovely.
Yeah, yeah. But it grows all around here in California. It's planted on the sides of the streets in the suburbs, which I think is really interesting. People like it for landscaping, and it's got these beautiful pink flowers with these very uh, it's the stamens that kind of puffball out that just they look so soft and nurturing, and their leaves are very frond like and sensitive. So the energy of that tree is just, if you've ever sat under one, it's just the feeling is it's beautiful, calm, relaxing. The flower essence calms that spirit and the overstimulated nervous system. And part of that action is by regulating the flow of life energy, which will help unblock emotions that when they get stuck generate anger, frustration, depression, or lack of joy. Um, yeah, I think
Interesting.
it's great for that concept of dissolving angry, frustrated, and depressed emotional states, and that helps get back on to joy. So that is a key essence for me for when I can see that the nervous system is just at a state where it's so frazzled that it's kind of like got to walk that down a bit to really go any further.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I think that the albizia is used for cooling heat in the Chinese medicine conception. So the heat can be overactivity anywhere, but in this case, it's overactivity of the mind, overactivity of the nervous system. One of the interesting things is that with the albizia or the mimosa tree, if you think about its pattern, it has these kind of ferny, frondy leaves that close up at night.
Mm-hmm.
And so it
Yeah.
has that pattern of active and then passive, relaxed. So it does that cycle. So it's really interesting that it helps to sleep. I know it more from making a monkey pod tree with Jane Bell in Hawaii. And the monkey pod is a type of albizia. I forget what species it is, but it's in that same family, and its qualities have that very calming and soothing qualities. It has a little more in the Hawaiian growing one. It has more of a kind of a masculine sheltering energy. So it gives you that quality of feeling really protected so that you can be calm and cool and sort of just downshift your nervous system into relaxation.
Oh, that's perfect. Exactly. And the other essence, which is so interesting with that going to that opening during the day, going to sleep during the night, action is California poppy. It does that with the flowers do that.
You're right. How
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. And I
Part of
love
the pattern.
right. And actually a lot of the flower essences that I like to use for this topic are also herbal remedies because of course that's my background. Um, so California poppy, is such a great nervous system relaxant uh, physically, and the flower essence I feel also has that, but it's dealing with like helping someone have an appropriate reaction in a given situation. So not overreacting in whatever way, shape, or form that means. I've actually like it in when I'm dealing with uh, allergies because I feel like that's an overreaction to a stimulus. So that emotional part of having an allergic reaction, it it California poppy can work with that as well. But from an emotional nervous system standpoint, the the California poppy, um, it definitely works with that stress response. And also it's all about the right use of whatever else you're doing. So if you're dealing with stress with other substances, it helps modulate that, to not abuse those other substances, whether they're illegal or legal.
Yeah.
And it is used in that sense as well. So it has such a great I like that poster you've seen on social media, that keep calm and carry on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think of that tagline when I think about California poppy.
Well, I mean, I think that it's interesting because it's that originated from, I think, World War II in England. That was something that the poster came up around the bombing of London on pretty much a nightly basis for years,
Oh
and it was an
god.
encouragement from the Queen to help people just sort of like hang in there. And I think that essences having emerged in England a little bit prior to that era, but they were certainly around. And I hope that I can only imagine seeing little bottles of Rescue Remedy being passed around to the children in the tunnels.
Oh, wow.
Wouldn't that be nice? We'll imagine that was happening because it was what a difficult time, full
Yeah.
of so much fear and terror.
Yeah.
I think about when somebody is feeling overwhelmed is talking about the question of where are those boundaries coming from? Are you feeling overwhelmed because you're not able to say no? Is there a piece of you that wants to please so much that you take on more than you really can or have the ability to fulfill? in those cases, I think that helping with some essences that support that boundaried nature can really help to relieve stress, because then you're starting to recognize what your limits are, because we all have limits. We all have things that we maybe we want to do but we just can't. I look at oak for that, which is one of Bach's essences as well. And I think that oak is really, really helpful for people who have a lot of strength. I think oak is kind of one of the mom remedies. So when you've got a lot of dependence, whether that's at home or at work or what have you, in order to help you learn to delegate a little bit more and to release some responsibilities so that everyone can start to pull with you rather than you going, okay, I can do one more thing and drag it along behind me. Oak helps you learn what your limits are before your body breaks down. Because I always think of the oaks in the wintertime. In my area, after storms, you see oaks just sort of shattered and falling in pieces. Big limbs fall off or the whole tree falls over. And that's kind of the signature of oak. It can live for a couple hundred years, but boy, when it goes, it falls to pieces and just in the middle of the night, boom. And I think that's kind of that oak pattern of somebody that's like, hang it in there. I can do this. I can do one more thing. And then, boom, they're just felled because they've overwhelmed themselves for too long.
What is so amazing about oak, because I live in an oak, mixed conifer oak redwood forest, and so they're everywhere. The way they grow and their limbs growing horizontally over roads, over I've got a big one over my driveway, and I feel like it's a protective arm, that's like reaching out and like protecting the property. Um, and I- it's kind of miraculous to see these heavy limbs grow so far out on that horizontal plane. Um, it sort of blows my mind. And maybe you can speak more about why that happens with the oak, but it also supports so much life in the forest. It's incredible, the squirrels and the birds and even the other plants around it. There's bay trees at the base of pretty much every oak around here, feeding off of it, uh, or growing. Uh, I think maybe it's a mutual thing, but definitely. And lichens and mosses. I mean, it's the amount of life that tree supports is amazing.
And oak is really its own ecosystem. If you spend a few minutes just sitting with an oak and spending time with it, you'd realize just how much life an oak supports, not just above, like you're saying, squirrels and birds, and the amount of acorns an oak tree can produce
Yeah,
so far in abundance of its own reproductive needs, right? I mean, it's clearly not just doing that just in order to throw down a few new oaks. It's
yeah,
the amount of poundage of how many oak acorns it can create. It's astonishing. So it's
right.
feeding in abundance. It's feeding the birds. It's feeding the squirrels. It's feeding tons of other creatures. Humans have been traditionally eating oak acorn everywhere that oak grew naturally, and also we have that for lumber, which is another element of what the oak provides.
Hmm.
But I love to think about, not just above the surface, but below the surface also. The oak has this huge mycorrhizal network that it's tapped into. And so there's fungi involved and there's all sorts of insect life. And the oak is just this gigantic giver of life.
Yeah, it's pretty magical.
Yeah, they're
And
really
it
great trees.
also in all of that sort of mundane uh action about how it's part of the ecosystem and everything that it does, um it has this sense of a magic to it.
Mm.
It's got these gnarly twisted branches that grow and seemingly it defying gravity and physics, the way it
Yeah,
looks. It's so beautiful and artistic, and
yeah,
I do think that is a really special tree and essence. Great for what you're saying with the strength, with giving strength to somebody.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
I also look in when we get into that realm of boundaries and kind of figuring out our limits. One of the other essences that comes up a lot for me in my practice is pink yarrow. Now, all the yarrows, and I'm sure you must use a variety of yarrows in your practice also because they're indispensable. The yarrow, sort of, if you're going for a generic yarrow, which would be more the white yarrow, is so helpful for kind of creating boundaries, both energetic boundaries as well as physical boundaries. Yarrow is incredibly useful for traditionally as an herb, right? It's helpful for stopping bleeding. So it's sort of like our actual boundary of the skin is benefited by yarrow. But in energetics with the flower essences, the yarrow really helps with our etheric boundaries and our energetic emotional boundaries. So the one that I think of the most for a lot of my clients is the pink yarrow. And pink yarrow is so helpful for empaths and sensitives. And that goes for our animal friends too, because a lot of them are very linked into us. Pink Yarrow gives you that ability to differentiate your needs and other people's emotions and needs, because a lot of us are so open and loving and caring that we sometimes forget that when we're connecting to somebody else's needs or emotions, that we don't have to take them on. And we can get really overwhelmed trying to manage everyone else's emotional needs. And Pink Hero helps you differentiate. Oh, I can see that you're feeling that, or I can experience you feeling that, but it doesn't need to be mine. Do you find that to be
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. It's a go-to for me personally. The pink yarrow, and I also do like the white and the golden yarrow as well. In herbalism, the yarrow is uh, as you say, stops bleeding. You can pick it from the yard and chew it up in your mouth and put it on a bleeding wound, and it'll help staunch that bleeding. But taken internally, it actually helps regulate the flow of blood, which is really interesting. You can take it to in the to bring on the menses, or once there's heavy menses, to reduce that. It does both. So that's a really interesting aspect of that herbal action. And so I like that extra insight into it helping to regulate sort of inflow and outflow.
And don't you think that that's one of the real assets and advantages of working with nature, of working with herbal or vibrational remedies, is that they have an intelligence that helps to regulate things, whether it's too much one direction or too much the other direction. We tend to think of sort of, I'm going to use the word dumb chemistry. You know, it doesn't have any intelligence. You've just put it in, take it, and it does its action. It whacks you on the head, or it does, it makes this stop or whatever, but it's not actually trying to regulate you into health. It's kind of overriding your system into one way or the other. So I think that when you're working with these remedies that are built in intelligence, they know how to help balance you. They know, like, okay, you've gone a little too far this direction or a little too far this way, and they can kind of help bring you into the center. So, with that bleeding image, external bleeding, internal bleeding, whatever it would be, is that it's actually helping to balance it. It's not trying to knock down a symptom.
Absolutely. And in the herbalism, there are a class of plants called adaptogens,
Mm.
which are similar in concept in helping the body to adapt and deal with whatever is stressing it. So, one that I really like, that's not just herbally, but is also made into a flower essence, and I particularly like the one that Floricopia makes, is rhodiola.
Oh, yeah.
They go to Iceland to make it, and it is just a potent adaptogen and creates that resistance to stress. It grows wild in extreme climates, like right out of lava rock and in ice and powerful Arctic conditions. If and So the flower essence, though, I love the way that it helps just provide that sort of inner strength, is how I look at it, to handle whatever is being thrown at you, whether it's emotions or the news cycle or Icelandic wind.
And I think that I love the idea of going to the essence first, or of going, maybe using it in concert. What I see sometimes is that there's some new herb, or not new, but some herb comes into consciousness, and everybody goes, it's an adaptogen or it's a whatever, and so it's great for everybody. So everybody needs to be taking lots of it.
Right.
And and it's just not sustainable. It's just, let's save scarce resources for where they can be used best, rather than just all of a sudden everybody needs to be taking tons of things. So I love that you can take the essence of the rhodiola and kind of help start building yourself without needing to take a lot of plant material. That's one of my favorite things about essences, is that they're so gentle to the earth because they're so diluted. You don't really need a lot of plants in order to make a lot of medicine.
Absolutely. And, also for the times when the herb might not be well tolerated by a person's constitution. For example, valerian, that is a great nervous system sedative. It's used popular in sleep aids. But, I have a constitution that runs warm. And if I'm one of, the percentage of the population that has adverse effects if I take valerian root. I'll wake up in the middle of the night. It'll give me sweats and nightmares. Uh, so it's not the herb that I can take, but I love the flower essence. And what's really neat about it is, if you haven't uh, seen the plant in itself, if maybe you're familiar with herbal medicine and you've taken valerian pills or gone to an herb shop and taken the bulk dried root out of the jar, as soon as you open that jar, the smell of dirty socks,
Funky.
key, hits you. It's very stinky, but the flowers are such a beautiful floral smell. It's so amazing that the flowers smell so wonderful. And I grow the California valerian,
Yeah.
um, so it's such a sweet plant. It's really interesting when um, you see the plant form of something you might be used to in a different context. So the valerian, though, the flower essence helps us relax in sort of a different way. I find that it's helping in that transition in other states of consciousness, like between waking and sleeping.
Mm.
Um, so where there's stress and pain associated with isolation or a belief of separateness, or um, sort of programming coming from outside of ourselves, that valerian flower essence helps connect to the soul group, that feeling of safety, and then a feeling of more control between sleeping and waking.
Interesting. Yeah, I've used it a little bit. The Flower Essence Society makes one in their Range of Light line, and they have a California valerian, and then also Alaskan Essences in their research section. They have a valerian, which is, I'm sure, the typical valerian species. So there's a number of different valerians that have been worked with as essences, and yeah, I like that concept that you can have the positive, the benefit, the light side of the medicine, without something that's sort of heavy and not well tolerated by a lot of people, like you say.
Yeah, and it kind of goes deeper, it gets at it from another level, not just
Yeah.
the physical.
Yeah.
So I love looking at that.
Yeah.
What
And
are
I'd love to talk about chamomile too,
Oh, yeah.
because I think chamomile is one of the most wonderful, kind of stress managers, of it. I love having a little cup of chamomile tea in the evenings. I find it very calming and soothing. But I really love to use the essence of chamomile because it's very, very helpful. It's very gentle as an essence. Some essences can be less gentle than others. They're all certainly more gentle than the most strong of any other kind of medicine, but they can still be a little more catalytic. But the flower essence of chamomile, I use the one from the Flower Essence Society. It's so gentle. I think the best indication for when chamomile is helpful is when you get nervous or upset and your stomach goes off. You know, you get a nervous tummy, or you get a little bloated, or you don't digest well, or any of the other possible digestive issues that can come along with a nervous stomach. And the chamomile essence is really helpful for that. And have you worked with a different type of chamomile?
No, I use the German chamomile that's
Okay.
used in herbalism. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have worked with the Roman chamomile from an aromatherapy standpoint, but not the flower essence for that yet. I can't wait to try it. It's
Yeah,
see
and
what
that's
it's
a
all
fun thing
about.
about flower essences
Yeah.
is there's always more to explore, always more to learn about. And I know that pineapple weed in the Alaskan Essence
Mhm.
line is in the chamomile family. I'm not quite sure what the botanical relationship is, and that's really great with kids too, or with big kids for helping get more grounding. It really helps with sort of those awkward clunkinesses in your body. So I use that quite a lot with my animal clients.
Yeah, uh, the pineapple weed is just starting to grow right now, and anywhere you look down on a gravel driveway,
Mhm. Yep.
that's it.
Yeah.
I love that little wild. It's a wild chamomile, and I can't remember the botanical name
Yeah.
either. But the German chamomile, one of the things that I find is it also helps give you that permission to relax. I feel like it helps with the permission. We don't give ourselves permission enough to relax. And if we're feeling like neglected from others or self-neglect, that chamomile is a good one for that as well.
Well, that's really interesting from the element, like you're saying, that permission to relax. If you think about it from the different types of states of the nervous system, when you're in the parasympathetic nervous system, which is calm, it's also relax and digest. So when we're always in sympathetic, go, 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 fight, flight, active, 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 we're never giving ourselves a chance to actually digest. We might cram food in our mouth, but it's going to be very hard to digest, and you're likely to get an upset stomach because you've never given yourself time to breathe and send the signal to your nervous system, okay, now it's time to actually do something with that food and get all the nutrients out of it. So I think that's kind of part of the culture is that we think that eating is finished by the time you swallow it, when in fact there's a lot more that
That's
needs
just
to
the
happen.
beginning. Yes.
Exactly. And it needs to happen in a state of calm and relaxation rather than running around like a maniac.
Yeah.
Can
And
we talk about lavender?
yeah, I
I
was
want to
just
talk about
going there.
lavender.
I was just on the tip of my tongue. I want to talk about lavender too. Yes.
Yay, lavender, everyone's favorite. Oh, I'll let you start because you're ready to roll.
Oh, well, um, obviously everybody knows about lavender and how, it's pretty popular and common in both as an herb and a um, essential oil
Mhm.
for used for relaxation. And the flower essence is also used for that. But the aspect that I see when I work with lavender is uh, around irritability and agitation, um, tension. And the other aspect, it has to do with that worry about the future. So those anxious thoughts, kind of what you were talking about earlier, imagining, worst case scenarios. All of that is sort of about not being in the present and projecting into the future. So the lavender energy I think of as serenity now, just like in Seinfeld, serenity now. If you've seen that episode with Shore.
I don't know that I caught that episode, but yeah, I
Okay.
think that there's nothing about living in New York that would have anything to do with serenity in any shape or form.
So lavender gives us that knowledge that saying, hey, all is well now and in the future. So you can release that fear, tension, worry, whatever that's coming from another place and time that's not right now.
Yeah, I just see the mental image for me of the lavender flower essence is just like it sort of pets our nerves so that they're just calm and smooth. It's just sort of tone down the whole nervous system, get everything to sort of ease and shake off and like, whew, okay, now you can kind of reset to a new state, to a new, calmer, more centered, more aware state rather than a reactive, which is the hot nerves, like the hot, fired up nerves just react, 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 react. And instead, that's probably not a healthy way to live. Let's find a way to find um, a response rather than reaction.
Yeah. What other essences do you want to talk about?
Well, I've got quite a few others. One of the ones that I was just kind of thinking of just now as we're talking about nerves and stuff, let's talk about stinging nettle a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's such an important herb, and it's one that's just starting to like pop out so much right now in my garden. And I can't wait to don some gloves first and pick a few to make some tea or to maybe make some sort of a addition to some soup or something. But I think the stinging nettle is another one to talk about when we talk about nerves, when we've got those really fired up nerves. And I look at it as being a shielding kind of an essence, where if you look at those little hairs on, if maybe microscopically almost, you have to look at those little hairs that are the stinging part, but they kind of help keep its space. And it helps you as an essence. It helps to not only calm your nerves but help you feel a little more safe in your space so that you're not feeling so triggered and aggravated all the time.
Yeah, it's a great boundary one as well because of that. Also, I see nettle as uh, a flower essence for sort of transformation of pain
Mm.
and fear, facing your fear. It's really interesting because, yeah, those little hairs that you're talking about, they're like tiny what do you call it, hypodermic needles that have that substance in them that cause the sting.
Yeah.
Uh, or because it's been used that what the term urtication.
Yeah.
If you heard that, because that's what's used when you slap the nettle against the skin, and it causes that redness and that histamine response. But so interesting is that it's taken in herbal medicine for allergies to alleviate the histamine response from pollens and hay fever and seasonal allergies. So, uh, yeah, I'm kind of, my brain is going back around to the California poppy that,
Mm-hmm.
in the case of allergy being sort of an uncontrolled over reaction,
Mm-hmm.
and nettle, perhaps the flower essence, helping us to again have a reaction that is not too much for what we're dealing with.
Yeah, right. It once again, it's that sort of that polarity where you see both sides of it. It has this quality of causing that inflamed reaction, but also like the other side of it is that it helps you not have that reaction.
Right.
That it all falls into that doctrine of
Yeah.
signatures theory.
And the urtication is actually used for our like pain relief. So it causes the stinging, causes the pain. But then for some people, just like bee sting therapy, it can be
Mhm.
medicinal.
Yeah, and any sort of thing like that, like the capsation that somebody would use for arthritic pain, that sort of thing,
Right, right.
harnessing that response.
Yeah.
I feel like we've gone through a lot of different essences. Is there maybe one more or two more that you feel like
Yeah,
we
I
have to?
kind of right.
We can't not talk about that.
More. um, yeah, the coast redwood. I in any like as we've talked in previous episodes, we are kind of going down lists and talking about different flower essences, but you and I both create custom formulas for people. and do so with some sort of sense of balance and hitting the different areas that need to be addressed. But the formula itself, I always like to include a tree or two or more, and especially for this topic because trees are so grounding in general. The coast redwood is such an amazing tree. Am biased because that's where we live. I live, and um, there's it's one of the tallest trees. It's the tallest tree on the planet, or can be. It's sibling sequoia, the biggest in diameter tree on the planet. They can live to be uh, 3,000 years old, and they are resistant to fire.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a big clue in being in resistance of
Mm-hmm.
inflammatory issues. But what I love about them the most is that they're a family. They don't grow in isolation. They grow in groups, and they feed their family members with their root system underground. So even if they're not connected above ground, when you see redwoods growing around each other, they are connected by their root system. And even though their root system is quite shallow, it doesn't go deep down into the ground. It goes wide, and it can go several miles wide. So there's stability there in reaching out to your support system,
Oh, I
which,
like that.
yeah, that's where there's a point, I swear.
No, no, I was loving every minute of that. That was great.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, in that family support, and whether that's your given family or your chosen family, um, yeah, that support system, redwood helps us do that. And it also, because it's such a tall tree, I feel like it helps us better see the big picture in situations. So, like taking the long view, and that helps us to not get so caught up in the minutia, the stressful minutia that might be happening from minute to minute. We can take a step back and see the big picture. And if we need support, we can reach out to our community. Um, uh, Coast Redwood.
Awesome. Yeah, I love the redwood, and I do use that a lot. Like you said, when I'm creating a formula, is not just sort of using essences topically. Okay, this is maybe the primary issue or complaint, but also creating that structure and including a tree is really valuable. I do love to use the redwood as well. I tend to use the one from the Range of Light from FES,
Mm,
and that has that, for me, as much as anything, it has that vertical channel that it just brings that grounded but this rising up,
yeah.
just strengthens that sense of self and that knowing of like, this is who I am. I love that image of that connection because I think I've felt that before, but I never quite said it that way. And
Yeah.
I really love that. And
Nice.
they grow so beautifully, like you say, in community. There's almost never just one. There's groups of them around, and they have that cathedral feeling. And the
Mhm.
cathedral is a group experience, right? It's not just a one person experience. If you're in community, you're with groups of other individuals.
Yeah,
Love
absolutely.
the redwoods. Yeah.
Do. Yeah.
Awesome.
I know there's so much analogy you can pull from it. I mean, it has the thick bark, so developing a thick skin.
But
Yeah.
so open. They
Mhm.
thrive in areas where there's that ocean dampness that spreads in over their leaves, and they suck in moisture from the air. So they have that connection to the airy realms, and they create these whole habitats up in their branches.
Yeah.
So they're a little bit like an oak in that it has this whole ecosystem. The redwoods, the coast redwoods, the very mature ones have ecosystems up way above where we can see.
Right. They take in water from the coastal fog. They take in their moisture. Uh, I read about the rates that they do that. You can't quote it, but it's pretty
A
amazing.
lot.
Them. Yeah. As well as they detox the air. They're cleaning the air for us, basically.
Yeah. Thank you, plants. We would not be here
Thank
without
you.
you.
Right.
You're much needed.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful talking with you.
Thank
And
you.
I can't wait till next time.
Thanks, Kathleen.
Bye now.
You've been listening to the Flower Essence Podcast with Urkana Feld and Kathleen Aspens, and we appreciate your interest in connecting with nature on a deeper level. You can find us online at thefloweressencepodcast.com or join us on Facebook and continue the discussion.
This podcast is meant for educational and entertainment purposes only. We are not physicians and do not diagnose, prescribe, or treat medical conditions. Please consult with your own physician or healthcare practitioner regarding the suggestions and recommendations made by the hosts and guests of the Flower Essence Podcast.